am back.
Welcome
Finally.
back.
The prodigal son returns.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your patience, and
technology forces you to humbleness. Let's say it that way.
I reached out to Michael Epstein to see if he could shoot you a link to join. I'm actually friends with him, so I wanted, like, he was like, does he know what it's for? And I was like, oh, well, I had gotten in touch back with the PR team, and I was like, I'll just wait. But I just wanted to make sure you were good. I'm very happy to be here with you.
Great. No worries. And like one of my favorite Michael J. Epstein quotes is, we all have to make art because otherwise the clowns will eat you. And you have the clowns in the back there.
Yeah, and that's very convenient. You know, also, I wanted to mention before we jump into it, I saw someone comparing you to Terrence Malick and Cronenberg. What do you have against Malick? You're not even a fan of Terrence Malick.
No, I'm not. In fact, like, so the thing is, so it's so fun that, but I don't have anything against Terrence Malick. His films are not for me, especially like Tree of Life. Jesus Christ, I don't know. Oh no, let me out. And so the thing, so it's so strange because at the moment I have kind of like two babies, and the one baby is Masking Threshold, and it's kind of like learning to walk, and I have to release it into the deep waters of the streaming release and the theatrical release. And at the same time, just now is the world premiere at Fantastic Fest. That's why I'm here, of Razzennest, which is my new film. And in Razzennest, actually, there are like there are a couple of Terrence Malick references in that film. So and of course, like lots of different references, because it kind of like has its spiel with art house films and what I dislike or not or like about them. It's like so Razzennest is almost like it's almost an homage to art house film, and it's also ripping it apart. And so in a certain way, I found that funny that guy on YouTube says like, oh my God, this looks like Cronenberg, like he watched too much Cronenberg and too much Terrence Malick or something like that. I mean, I hope he will see the film. It's personally, I don't think it's Cronenbergian at all, and I don't think it's Terrence Malickian at all, but we'll see.
Yeah, you know, Razzennest was actually my introduction to you. I'm one of those people that listens to the audio commentary of nearly every film. So I loved it. I loved the joke. I loved the ride. You know, can you talk a little bit about how that film became a thing, like where it all began? You know, how did that conversation start?
Okay, so the conversation with Razzennest actually pretty much starts also with Masking Threshold. So Masking Threshold for me was an interesting introduction to the world of the genre film festivals, because I've done films before and I'm a very nerdy character, but I've never been to a real genre film festival. And then last year the world premiere of Masking Threshold happened at Fantastic Fest, and I learned to know the posse here and the people and the journalists and all that stuff. I found it so refreshing in a way compared to some of the film festivals I've been to, because my films were always like hard to categorize, yeah. But it seems, especially my last two films, were playing more in this like art house context of festivals, but not genre film festivals. Yeah, although they, technically speaking, my first feature film was Traceroute, and that's a documentary about nerd culture, and would have perfectly fit into Fantastic Fest as well. But strangely, it ended up in a completely different circle of film festivals. So when I arrived last year, and it was a kind of like special time because COVID was still going on, but it was not as bad. And so I met a lot of people here and talked to a lot of people, yeah. And so and the first seed for Razzennest was kind of like the genre festival crowds and what I liked about it. And I met a friend here, a new friend called Eric McGyver, and he presented a film at the last year's Fantastic Fest called Ike Boys. It's a very sweet film about like coming of age story mixed up with manga and monster films. It's so, and I liked him very much, and I invited him over to come to Vienna. And in Vienna, he asked me a really interesting question: could you recommend the last like 10 or 15 films to me from Austria of the last 10, 15 years? So because I want an overview of Austrian films. And then I made this list, and I realized that there are many films on that list that are very important, but I dislike them. And for example, there's this one specific film called Homo Sapiens. It's by a guy called Nikolaus Geierhalter, and he always wins stuff at Cannes and stuff like that. But he is a representative in my worldview of that specific kind of art house film that you know that I dislike or like not enjoy as much. There are aspects of it that I like, but I mean, and Homo Sapiens is pretty much like a 90-minute or 100-minute film with not a single pan. It's like 1-minute shots of rundown buildings in Fukushima and like in Michigan and everywhere. And it's pretty much like it's almost like a coffee table book, you know, of rundown places. And I remember that moment when he films like for a whole minute this rundown like shopping mall, and there's water dripping from the ceiling, but there's this almost no movement, and suddenly a pigeon flies by, and people in the audience started clapping because something was moving. It was almost like a comic relief moment of like, oh, there's a pigeon. You know? And I think that was kind of like the second, like the Fantastic Fest art house crowd versus the art house crowd. Then like being reminded of Nikolaus Geierhalter and his work, and specifically Homo Sapiens. And I had a conversation with a friend of mine about the 30 Years War, and that is very important in Razzennest. And he was from the UK. I remember, yeah, he was from the UK, and he never heard of that war. And that war is so important. It is like it shaped the entire continent of Europe up until today. It's like it's something that you kind of learn in school every now and then, and it's also a little bit funny because what most people remember of the 30 Years War is, I don't even mention that in Razzennest, but it starts with this guy being thrown out of a window in Prague, and it's called the defenestration of Prague, which is such a great term. Yeah, some envoy gets thrown out of a window, and that started one of the most bloody wars in all of European history, maybe in the history of the world. And statistically speaking, like more people in Europe died than in the Second World War. Just
oh, wow.
there were areas in Europe where 60% of the population died. That didn't even happen in the Second World War. So it's a strange, bloody war, incredibly cruel. Almost no one knows about it. And I always thought, and especially in that area where I grew up, in it's kind of like northwest of Vienna. If you go outside of Vienna to the northwest, that's where I grew up. And that area that you see in Razzennest is pretty much like 10-15 miles from where my hometown or home village is. And I kind of grew up there, like cycling there and knowing about the Swedish holes, the Swedish caves and all this stuff. And I kind of grew up with that. And for me, it's something kind of normal to know that, oh, there are a couple of holes in the ground where people lived for months and months because like the Swedish army came through. And nowadays, I mean, if you think of Sweden, it's just like, it's the, you know, like the social welfare state per definition, and everyone loves it there. And just a couple of 100 years ago, they were the colonizers, at least for our part of the world in Europe, because we were the Catholics and they were the Protestants, and the whole war was about this like weird little infight of forms of Christianity, you know. And that was also like another aspect of that. And I think at one point, and that was the 31st of January this year, I remember it, I was having a shower. I never had an idea in the shower before that, but I really had an idea in the shower, and it was like, hey, why not put this and this and this and this together and make this crazy art house film about the 30 years war that nobody will be able to understand. You have to explain it. Why not put an audio commentary on top of that? And why don't we, I'm not sure how much I should spoil about the whole thing, but and I think that was the final straw, the final thing that needed to happen in my mind. So I thought like, okay, let's get going. And really, it was very fast. I was super excited about the film, that I had the idea, or the idea like coagulated, like on the 31st of January, and the film was done by early June. It was a super fast process after that.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. My wife did as well. And while I did love that film, I also want to mention Masking Threshold a little bit, just because it is coming to streaming very soon. And I'm kind of curious about the filmmaking process with this film. I'm assuming there's a lot of pre-production and that goes into both of your films, or a lot of your films. Does something like these types of projects, do they take longer than your typical narrative? Because you have to it's almost like a huge puzzle in a sense.
Yeah.
So
it is like a puzzle that you want to solve, but you don't have you don't have the print for the puzzle. You're kind of like puzzling around and trying to, does it fit or does it not fit? So I had more time with Masking Threshold, because I remember I wrote on Masking Threshold, I wrote Masking Threshold with a friend, Samantha, and I think the writing process for Masking Threshold was longer because it was more, in a certain way, precise. So it's not that, but there's a different quality in Masking Threshold, because it needed a communication between the visuals and the writing. And when we wrote the whole thing and started planning the shoot, I constantly rewrote stuff in the script, and I was able to do that because I knew that I would do a basic rough cut of the film, then record the audio track, put that onto the film, and then do a couple more rounds of editing with that. So there was a little bit more communication going on between shooting and writing and rewriting and shooting, and that went on for a couple more months. In the case of Razzennest, it was pretty much the script. I wrote the script, and then I needed to find a visual way of enhancing that story. So, because at the same time, it is a film that should kind of stand on its own. It's that crazy art house film with its soundtrack. So, in fact, I actually at some point watched the documentary. So I watched the film without the audio commentary track, because I was interested in, does it work? Would that go through in a classic art house? Would that work in a classic art house film context? Yeah. And I decided, yes, it does work. It does work without the audio commentary track. It's just very weird and very dark, and the soundtrack by Alec Empire. So it works, but of course that was not the outcome I wanted it to have. So the idea was first writing the script, and I didn't change a lot. So I wrote the script, we recorded it, we edited it, and then I had kind of the backbone of the story. And the second layer was, of course, I needed to create the art house film. And what I wanted to do is almost establishing a certain visual grammar, or however you want to call it, in the first half hour of the film. So people kind of get used to the images. They kind of get used to how that film looks like and feels like. And then, of course, in the end, when all the crazy stuff happens, I kind of could play with those elements that I introduced in the first 30 minutes or something like that, or 40 minutes of the film, and then speed it up, play with it, and kind of have more communication between the audio track and the actual film. But I didn't want it to be too blunt. I didn't want it that audience constantly have the feeling of like, okay, now he's doing all the wild stuff in the visuals of the art house film because he somehow has to fill the gaps of the commentary or track or something. So, but I wanted it to be subtle enough that it could be a coincidence, and but there should still be a communication going on between what's happening on the in the horror narration and the visuals of the art house film.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, it packed a huge punch. I like the way you said that you kind of laid the groundwork in the first 30 minutes and then ultimately shifted a little bit. Yeah, it works perfectly as far as I'm concerned. I'm also curious, as you know, you have this idea. I mean, you could actually argue with both films. Actually, you have this idea, you finally sit down and watch them with an audience. You know, how gratifying, you know, and satisfying is that to have these. You know, all I've heard is good things about both of these films. You know, and then Masking Threshold is 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. You know, did you expect these types of responses, or
no, not at all? And interestingly, just a couple of days ago, when I'm not a huge fan of, you know, like press embargoes and all that stuff, but I mean that's how the world goes, and so there were no reviews coming out until the beginning of Fantastic Fest for Razzennest, and so there was this point when I was actually really nervous or anxious that like, fuck, all this stuff is coming in. But in both films, with Masking Threshold and with Razzennest, I really had the feeling when I watched the film for the first time with my crew in an intimate setting, just like watching it together for the first time. I had the feeling in both cases, oh my, yeah, it is what I wanted it to be. It is very close to what I had in my headspace, you know, like it's very close to what I wanted it to be. But the next question always is like, who the fuck does want to watch this, you know? And who is enjoying this, you know, like, and really, I had the same feeling again like I had last year when Masking Threshold was coming out at Fantastic Fest. This year, it's like, oh my God, this, I know this is a weird, and then the first reviews came in, and I was like, okay, I'm happy. People seem to get it. People seem to appreciate my idea, let's call it that way. And of course, you can have lots of debates and discussions about the idea, and some people love it so much that they give you 5 stars, which is kind of like crazy. And some, but it doesn't matter. I think the really important aspect is I'm not even super afraid. Like, after what I've read so far, I'm happy that there are some people out there who seem to get it, who seem to get what I tried to accomplish. And even like the one negative review I read so far, and it's only on Letterboxd, but it doesn't matter. Yeah, I read them all. I want to know, is almost like the guy is so passionately hating it that I think like, well, I created an emotional machine that made you like write a review where you just like tell all you hate about it. And that's also not bad. I think like the only thing that's bad in making art is indifference. If people are indifferent to your film, if they don't even bother to write a review about it, that's the thing that's bad. And it's not bad if you get a bad review, or we're in the business of kind of like trying to sell our lies and made up realities to people, you know. It's strange that artists lie for a living, you know, like they make shit up and then are trying to figure out if people bought their lies. And you know, and yeah, weird times for a filmmaker when your baby is so fresh and like the placenta is still laying around, you know.
Well, you know, it's funny you should say that about making, like, you're selling lies. So when I watched Razzennest, I went into it completely blind. And so again, my wife and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So we looked you up to see what else we could watch. and I wasn't entirely sold on the fact. I thought maybe you were a character, like that you had made this character that was making this film.
Like
Yes.
layers upon layers. No, not that. I mean, honestly, I like that kind of stuff. I kind of grew out of my need of pranking people. So I had like as part of Monochrome, we did lots of pranks. We sent like a fake artist as the Austrian national representative to one of the biggest art fairs on the planet and stuff like that. So I like that, yeah. But my intention with Razzennest was never to prank people. I heard the story. I did an interview a couple of days ago where one journalist told me the story that a guy, a colleague of him, called him and asked him if he also got the wrong link, because it seems that he got the link with the audio commentary track. If he has the link without the audio commentary track, and that guy said like, no, that's the film. Just watch it. And I never thought that someone would fall for that, because for me, even with the crazy names and everything, it should be clear within a minute that this is, at least in the beginning of the film, satire, or is meant as it's humorous, you know.
Yeah. And once you kind of get the joke, you know, or once the wheels start turning, I mean, you might as well strap in, because you're along for that ride. And what a great ride it was. You know, before we go, I just want to give you the opportunity. Is there anything else you want to mention? Any projects you're working on outside of this? I know these babies are fresh, but you know, where can people find you and things like that?
Like I have my incubators are everywhere. And no, so like I'm working, my next film will be a documentary. I'm working on it for like the last 2 years or so. So it is it was a very interesting process, because I only could work on that stuff for like a month or two, and then I had to wait to get additional footage and stuff like that. So it's kind of like it was dispersed over the last 2 years that I've been working on that documentary, but it will finally be done, I guess, by early next year. So I hope in February or March it will be done, and I will be able to send it to the festivals. It's also a very nerdy documentary, but it's something completely. It's called Hacking at Leaves, and it's on the one hand the story of U.S. colonialism and the genocide of the native population, but it's also a film about hackerspaces and makerspaces, and it's also a film about COVID. So it's almost 2 hours. It's like an hour 50 or 55. I don't know. We haven't done the final like picture lock yet, but it will be a very pop culturally aware documentary. But it is almost like a very funny horror film, because I'm talking about horrendous things, you know, like the genocide and COVID and other things. But it is like it's the reality, I guess, of the horror of the world. I mean, I tried that a little bit, of course, in a different way in Razzennest, because Razzennest is a film about war. Like if it comes down to, if people ask me what is Razzennest, I say like it's a film about war. It's a film about war, and that war will always catch you at some point. You know, like we can't avoid it. You know, and that documentary is also a horror film, but it's about the reality of the world and the horrors of non-functioning systems like healthcare in the US, etc. Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, you've definitely won me over. I am a fan for life now.
Oh, thank you so much.
Here at CineDump, we let the doers know how they're doing, and you are doing just fine. I absolutely loved your films, and I can't wait to see what you do next. Thank you for the time, and have a good day.
Thank you so much.
Adios.